Leave a comment where you are watching in the world. If you love true crime, check out our new page in the description below. Thank you. It was a few years ago, and I had been an active online dater for a while. Long enough to know that people definitely exaggerate and even lie in their dating profiles, and that oftentimes the person turns out to look nothing like their photos. I matched with a guy on Tinder, and he was definitely one of those questionable swipes, where his photos were kind of blurry, but his apparent job and hobbies were interesting enough. So swipe I did, and we ended up making a date to grab a drink on St. Patrick's Day. As an aside, when dating, for the first date I always only make plans to grab a drink or a coffee. Generally a drink, because I do better with a little bit of social lubricant when meeting someone new, so that I can get a quick assessment of the person and then beg off if there is no chemistry, or if they are a creep, or whatever. So, I get to bar where we are to have our date, and the guy is nearly an hour late. He texts me along the way to tell me he had trouble getting a cab, so being the nice person that I am, I wait for him to arrive instead of just blowing him off and leaving, as I was tempted to do. When he finally arrives, he is super flustered and weird and clearly the socially awkward type. He looked sort of like his photos, but had definitely put on a few, if you know what I mean. Whatever, I'm not horribly superficial, no big deal. Anyway, back to the socially awkward. I know we all have our moments, but this guy didn't even seem to be able to order a drink from the server without falling all over himself. I was like, whoa dude, relax, it's just a beer. I do not believe that he was drunk, however, which was my first suspicion. So we finally get our drinks. I've already had one since I was sitting and waiting for him for so long, and exchanging the usual first date info, and I am definitely not into him. He had clearly lied about his job in his profile, and honestly seemed like kind of a weirdo. And I am from Portland, home of the weirdos. This guy was a different breed of weirdo. Either that, or he had some kind of mental disability that I was not able to pinpoint in the small amount of time we had spent together. After about 10 or 15 minutes, the guy says it's St. Patrick's Day. I feel like we should get some whiskey. Do you want some whiskey? I love whiskey and drink it often, so I agreed. The guy, awkwardly, orders 2 shots of Jameson, and as soon as the server brings them over he tells her that we will have 2 more. I'm thinking, okay dude, chill out, because he had previously mentioned that he is a lightweight in the drinking department. Before we take our shots, he looks me in the eye and says, "Whiskey makes me kind of crazy, just so you know." And I was like, thanks for the intel, sort of assuming that he meant like massive quantities of whiskey made him crazy. Well, I was about to find out that he was being completely serious, and I was in for quite the show. We clink our shot glasses together, and before I can get the shot glass to my lips, he asks if I am going to drink the whole thing. Yeah dude, it's just shot, but I confusedly mumble something like, I don't know, maybe? I am not a big shot drinker. Sometimes I drink the whole thing in one swallow. Sometimes I don't. Geez, why do you care? So I take the shot, and he takes about half of his, and when he sees that I drained mine, he yells at me. You liar. You said you were not going to drink the whole thing. You lied to me. I just sort of stared at him, and didn't have a chance to respond because the server was back with our second round of shots. At this point I am starting to think this is maybe a bad idea, but before I can say or do anything, the guy downs the second shot and looks at me triumphantly, as if he has accomplished something super manly and commendable. Me. Yay, you took a shot. What do you want, a freaking cookie? Christ almighty, is this date over yet? Obviously I didn't really say that, but I should have, because then he went berserk for absolutely no reason at all. And if I had at least said that, he may have had some mild justification for what was about to happen. The guy got super angry and started yelling and flailing his arms around, telling me that he would kill anyone that came near me. He would fucking shoot anyone that ever tried to come near me or my son. At this point, I was like, holy shit. This guy is psycho. And I start to wonder if he is possibly carrying a gun on his person. I make a move to get up so that I can pay my tab and be done with it. The guy obviously sees me get up, and he just assumes I am going to the bar to get more drinks, and says he needs to go to the restroom. I walk up to the bar and pay my tab, and look to the back of the bar. It was not a large bar, just a standard, open, rectangular room with bathrooms in the back, clearly labeled next to the pinball machines. And I see the guy wandering around in small, drunken circles looking for the bathroom. So, I decide to take pity on this poor fool and walk to the back of the bar and show him where the restroom is. He had used it previously without incident, so I couldn't figure out why finding it again was such an issue. As soon as he gets inside the men's room, I can hear him becoming violently ill, puking his guts out. The people sitting at the bar can hear it and are looking at me like, What the hell is going on? I literally told them, I don't know him. I think he might be crazy. Like really crazy. They continued to look concerned, but went back to their own conversations. At this point, I should have just left, but I waited until the guy came out of the bathroom so that I could say goodbye. He comes out like nothing happened. He acts like a totally different person. All the rage and anger were gone, and just this nice, normal guy comes out speaking in regular tones and sounding not at all like the person that went into that bathroom a few minutes before. I am saying my goodbyes to him, just saying whatever I have to say to get out of this situation immediately, and the dude pops a piece of gum in his mouth, and then grabs me and tries to kiss me. At this point I was really quite glad that I had been doing all those yoga classes, because I practically did a back bend to get my face as far away from his face as possible with him holding on to me. I am not going to kiss you, you gross vomiting crazy person. At this point I actually ran. I full on ran out the door and started sprinting up the street. The bartender was actually around the corner having a cigarette and asked me as I whizzed past if everything was alright, and I yelled back over my shoulder, I'm fine. Just running away from that guy. I got into my car and waited to make sure he wasn't following me, and for the adrenaline to subside a bit, and drove home thinking that was the end of that. Inexplicably, that was not the end. The guy ended up texting and calling me incessantly for weeks, asking what he did wrong and begging to see me again. Those calls and messages went unanswered until I finally blocked him in all ways possible, and that was that. I hope I never see him again. I cannot imagine how he did not have any inkling of what went wrong on that date. Wow, writing this has brought back so many memories of other terrible dates. I could write a book, but this was the first one that came to mind. Something like 5 years ago, I was talking with a woman on OkCupid. In text, email, and on the phone, she sounded sharp, huge for me, funny and energetic. We set up a coffee date, and I pick a place in her neck of the woods as I had a nearby errand to run anyway. Show up to the date, and she tells me she doesn't really care for coffee. Operating under the assumption that I must have missed that cue during our conversations, I ask if there was anything nearby that she preferred, it being her region of town anyway. She said yes, that one of her favorite spots was just a 5-minute walk away. We walk over, making pretty great conversation. Turns out we have a lot in common, including an interest in theater, comedy, similar references/influences, and even a bit of flirting, a playful arm punch from her. We get to the destination, and it is a pet store. I love pets, so I figure this could be like some sort of window shopping date, full of good conversation and getting to know her. We walk in, and breaks off almost immediately, pulls out a list from her purse, and comes back with a cart of pet goods in a few minutes. I'm pretty clueless, and try to ask if she wanted to look around or something before checking out. She says that no, she got what she needed. She pays, and I help her carry the 50 pound of dog food back to her car. We get back to her car, put the stuff away, and as I close the trunk, I see that she's inside and has started the car. I walk over to her side of the car, and she says that she really has to go. I back up so she can pull out, and she drives off. With a little feeble wave, I am confused and go back to run my errands. First, however, I am going to get that coffee. Walk back to the coffee place, and while waiting for my drink, I look at the art on the walls and realize that at least 5 of the 10 or so pieces of art on the wall have her name on them. Turns out, she's really good. No clue what happened on the date, but oh well. Back to errands. Fast forward a couple of hours, and I get a text from her saying that we should meet up later that day. I reply that I am still in the area and was going to get something to eat. She's welcome to join me. She said yes, and we made another date. Show up at the restaurant, and again we hit it off. Turns out she paints, is a great photographer, and she's taking sculpting classes while she has her day job as a commercial photographer. She's really interested in my work, scientist/engineer, and the meal just rushes right by. After an hour or so, she sees some of her friends walking across the street and says that she'll be right back. She runs out of the restaurant. Her friends are all super excited to see her, and they just immediately start talking excitedly and walk off. I wait 10 minutes, but nothing. Send a text, nothing. Even more confused, I pay the bill and walk back to my car. That was enough for me, and I was going home. Driving home, and getting my stuff ready for work the next day, when I get another text. She wants to know if I'm free to join her and her friends for a comedy show. She says one of her friends can get us in for free, and that Nick Swardson was the headliner. I was super pumped as I love Swardson more than I was weirded out by our 2 dates. So I show up and meet her and her friends. I hit it off again with the girl. Turns out we know some common people, but all her friends are giving me the "did you just fart" look the entire night. So, I make an effort to try to get to know them more, but they aren't enthralled by my presence. I chalk it up to the fact that the girl really is like 9.5/10, and on my best days, I'm a lucky 7. The show is starting, so we're getting seated, and they put us in the front row table. I start to panic a bit, as I do not like being the guy comedians interact with. However, my panic turns to sudden crotch sweating as I see that there are 5 cameras in the room. It turns out that this show is being recorded. Even better, it turns out that Swardson was never on the bill, and it is a bunch of comedians I have never heard of. I'm ready to roll with it, as this girl is fun to talk to. Then her friend, the one who works at the club, comes up to us and tells us that we need to be sure to laugh a lot as our table will be visible by the cameras. The lights dim, the show starts, and the comedy doesn't. There were people talking, and the audience was there, but it was just failed joke after failed joke. I'll remember this till the day I die. At one point, one of the comedians states that everyone has a Jewish aunt. That's the joke. You know what I'm saying? No I don't, but because of the cameras, I sure have to act like I do. Line after line, comedian after comedian, 3 hours later, my face is just aching from fake smiles. My hands are raw from fake clapping. My mood is in the floor as I realize that my date is living this. My exhaustion suddenly turns to excitement when the show closes, but then slowly turns to panic as she leans in and asks if I liked the show. I said that some of the comedians had a few good jokes, trying to be positive. She punched me in the arm again and told me that I was dead wrong. Dead wrong. That show was hilarious. Seeing her laugh at so many terrible jokes just ruined any attraction I had or her. I say that it is getting late and I have work tomorrow, so I need to go. She asks if I'll walk her to her car since she parked away from her friends. I say yes, and we walk towards the exit. I walk her to her car, she hugs me, then gives me a slow, deep kiss, and says that she really wishes I understood her better. I was tired. I was exhausted. I wanted to know what the hell was going on. Out of all the thoughts running through my head at that moment, I don't think I said anything except, "Hey, how'd the dog food get from the trunk to the rear seat?" She said, and I'll never forget this, "It just does." And she drove off. So, it just does. And it just did. 2 weeks later, I get a phone call from her saying that she saw my profile on OkCupid and thought we should go get some coffee sometime. Oh good. I know this is late, but this is too good. So I have a friend, and we've been friends for about 3 to 4 years. I guess this year he went through some stuff and finally asked me out. I said yes, despite previously telling him I was not interested. So let's get to the story. Date starts. I pick him up and drive to a restaurant that I love. It's this hole-in-the-wall taco joint. When we get out of the car and get in line to order, I go up to order, and I got 3 tacos. Now I'm hungry, so I'm not against eating in front of people, and I paid for myself. He made some comment under his breath, and I, jokingly, said, "Oh, you're calling me fat?" And he says, "No, not fat necessarily, but I mean you could lose a little weight." I was taken aback, but go find a table nonetheless. He sits down and decides the best place to start this conversation is with, you guessed it, religion. He starts asking me all sorts of questions of what I believe in and what I think about what he believes. I say that perhaps this isn't the best place to discuss this subject, and maybe we should talk about something else. He disagrees and keeps at it. After my second attempt at switching the topic, he follows, but decides to discuss evolution. He goes on at length. When I tried to say something, he'd bulldoze what I was saying, and he would keep going on whatever he wanted. I tell him, in this place and with this topic, I feel uncomfortable, and asked if we could please talk about something else. He again agrees. Now a little backstory. I had been talking to him about some issues I was having with my parents/family, so the next topic he brings up, family. He goes on and on about how great his family is and how it's so confusing to him how I could be upset with my family. I said that I didn't dislike my parents, they just don't support me very much. And he says that I am acting like an ungrateful child. I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't say anything. At this point I have finished my meal, and I'm waiting on him. But he's still going on, and this was no gag date or anything. He was having a great time. He notices I have finished my meal, and decides to mention it. He says, "Wow, you ate all that food? Maybe you should eat less." I again ignore the comment, and ask him about school. He then starts on his old girlfriend, and on a date. I went on with a mutual friend. It wasn't a date, but he kept referring to it as such, saying he had an inside story. Again, I tried to talk about something else. A different mutual friend and his new job. He went on about extensive details of his past relationship, from dates to much more than that. They were together for 2 years, and it was just on, about her and her parents. He segues that into politics, and keeps asking me about my political views, and tells me about his own. Finally, I tell him that I need to go, and the restaurant was closing. We had been there 2 hours. So we got up to leave. The date went on. He insisted on dessert for another hour. Before we left, he wanted to clarify that this wasn't a date. We just wanted to force me to hang out with him. It was the worst date possibly in the existence of the human race. Highlights of the rest of the night include an intervention about how I treat my friends, a friendship ultimatum, many repeats of phrases like, "Well, let's do X, oh no, actually that would be too much like a date." However, my favorite part of the second part of the evening was the closing line of, "If we lived in a different world, I would totally date you. But in that world, I wouldn't be asexual." It was a terrible date, and the cherry on the top. Next day he texts me, "I had a great time last night. I hope you did too." I replied I didn't. My friends thought I and this lady would be a great match. This happened. It was about 2009 or so. They showed her a picture of me and showed me a picture of here. She was quite attractive with big boobs and birthing hips, which is my fetish, so I was in. I am very tall, muscular, good job, etc., so she was excited. We started talking on the phone, several times, and texting. We agreed to meet for date. She's telling me the whole time how successful and rich she is. She is an executive for a local telecom/internet company. Just got done throwing a big party for 500 people in her backyard, etc. She was very charming, sweet, and nice on the phone. I agreed to meet her during the week after work. I live 90 minutes from her home, so I have conditions. I will need to come to your house, shower, dress, and maybe do laundry because I have to work the next day. She agrees and everything is awesome. We agree to have a barbecue at-home date, where I barbecue steaks and shit, then drink wine, and have a wonderful time together. She thinks me grilling steaks and wine drinking is perfect, and is very excited. My only request is that we don't meet any family members of hers. I get off work and drive to her house, which she just had a party for 500 people. It's in a shitty part of town, and it's a duplex with a small backyard that would not accommodate 500, not even close. I give a deep sigh and step out of my truck. She comes outside with her big boobs and short shorts, waving, so I was thinking this could end well. She has 3 massive pit bulls and a border collie, which want to greet me as well, because they are at the gate barking and snarling at me. I don't skip a beat. I open the gate, and the dogs are on me like puppies. I love dogs, and these dogs love me back. No problem at this point. We greet each other with hugs, and she decides to show me how she plays with her dogs. She throws a tennis ball across her muddy backyard, and these K9s go rushing for it. The biggest pit bull gets the ball, returns it, and punches me right in balls, hard. I'm down. After I recover, I request to take a shower, get cleaned up, and change clothes. No problem here. Bathroom was clean. I was quick. Upon entering her mansion, I was floored by the unclean smell of neglected litter boxes. After the shower, I request a beer. She says she's out. I suggest we go to the grocery store and liquor/beer/wine store to prepare for dinner. We travel to get steaks, salad, beer, etc. I buy some nice ribeye steaks, wine, beer. We get home, and I start the fire for grilling. The dogs know what up, and then we can't get rid of them. She starts throwing the tennis ball, and the digs return, covering me with mud. While we are waiting for the fire to heat up, she wants to give me a tour of the house. She takes me into the basement, and the smell of cat piss and ammonia was overwhelming. At this point, I just said fuck it, and decide to enjoy the ride. The cat box hadn't been cleaned in 3 to 4 months, and there was a workbench in the basement with duct tape, gloves, torture tools, etc. I opened a small basement window to help clear the cat smell. After getting freaked out by the basement, I figured the fire was ready and prepared the steaks, olive oil, seasoning, and then prepared an avocado/tomato salad. Start grilling the steaks, and notice she is not drinking wine or beer. Steaks done. Prepare the table. Border Collie eats my steak. I eat her steak. Her parents drop by. Even though I requested, I don't want to meet anyone. I start to drink heavily at this point. I am too intoxicated to drive 90 miles home at this point, as well. I say I have to do laundry for work the next day. She washes my clothes. She starts to drink wine. After me clothes are done washing, she says that her dryer is broken, and we need to go to her daughter's house to dry them. I start to drink more heavily. We arrive at her daughter's house. Her pit bulls greet me with huge paws to the nutsack. I'm down. Literally down, because this huge beast nailed my nads. After a few moments I recovered. Now I have to make small talk. Her granddaughter was like Kim Kardashian crossed with Lady Gaga. At this point I wanted them all exterminated. All I want at this point is my clothes dry for work in the morning. The clothes dry. We get back to her house, and she starts drinking wine like a madman. I drink very heavily as well, because I just want to go to sleep at this point. I have clean, dry clothes for tomorrow. I am happy. All of a sudden she starts flailing about / seizures and passes out on the floor. I am drunk and panicking. I look in her purse and find glucose tablets. Call 911. All of the people in her family show up before the ambulance arrives and commence to bitch at me because she is a diabetic and can't drink alcohol. So I'd been talking to this girl from Tinder. We'd made plans to meet on a number of occasions, and she'd always bailed / ignored texts on the day of the date. I give it one last go at actually getting her to go on a date. She was, from her pictures, a solid 8.5, where I'm charitably a 6, so I figured it was worth it. This time she agrees, and that Saturday, I find myself driving over to her house to pick her up to go for a pub lunch down by the river. On arrival at her house, she comes out looking amazing in a white summer dress, and we set off. Everything goes great. We talk easily, although I get the impression she's exaggerating her job status somewhat. I'd seen the house she was sharing, and it didn't match the kind of role she was claiming to have. But still, who cares, she's gorgeous. Lunch goes well, and we go for a walk along the river holding hands. Come back to the pub for another drink, and she asks what I have planned for the rest of the day. When I tell her nothing, she asks if she can stay at my house tonight. I agree, for the reasons already outlined. We finish up and drive back to mine with her massaging my shoulders and lap all the way. While we're going, she informs me that just because she is staying at mine tonight, she isn't easy, and I agree wholeheartedly. Back at mine, we have a look around, make out a little, and then decide the evening is still young, and we should go into town. We walk in, and I notice that it's exceptionally hard to walk holding hands with her, as she's always pulling in the wrong direction or adjusting her grip. In town, we have a couple more drinks and a meal. By this time, she's probably had 5 large white wines over 6 hours, so is a little tipsy. This seems to lead to her becoming more touchy-feely and generally more horny. Again, at this point, I'm really not complaining. In the last pub we stop at before heading back to my house, where she assures me she is going to make my cock feel better than it ever has before, I notice she has her phone out while we wait at the bar, and she's reading an email she just received with the title, "Living with People with BPD." Immediately things start to make sense, her hot and cold nature in the past, her exaggeration, and the spur-of-the-moment way things have worked out today. But I feel like I'm too far gone to wriggle out completely right now. Too drunk to drive her home, and too far from her home to pay for a taxi. We finish our drinks and head back to mine, her hand tugging mine in all sorts of directions on the 15-minute walk. Part of the journey involves walking down a well-lit pathway beside the railway station. As we walk down the path, she tugs my hand backwards. When a couple come the other way down the path, she virtually throws herself into the bush beside it. When we get to the other end, she is almost in tears because she doesn't like enclosed places, because she's lived in some nasty places. With a little reassurance that there are no more enclosed spaces on the way, we start walking again, but now on the 15-minute walk, which she already did in the opposite direction 2 hours ago, she asks every 30 seconds how much further we have to go. At first it's endearing, but it rapidly becomes irritating, as every time she asks she stops dead and won't move until I've explained fully exactly how long it's going to take. That part of the ordeal ends when we get back to my house. In the kitchen, she drops her dress in a puddle on the floor and starts making out with me in just her panties before I can even lock the door. I lead her upstairs, and we make out for a while on my bed while she undresses me. At one point she rolls on top of me and tells me, "I want this to go easy peasy, catchy monkey." I agree, despite not having the faintest clue what that means. Then with her next breath, she tells me she's not just going to have wax with me, and if I don't like that I can leave. I don't like to point out we're in my house. I assure her if she doesn't want to have sex, we won't. And at this point I know I will not have sex with we tonight, as doing so, with someone with clear mental issues after they've told you they don't want to, can only lead to horrendous sorts of trouble. We make out some more, with me having to assure her every couple of seconds that it's fine that we aren't going to have sex. I have to be up early in the morning to run her home and to go to work, so we decide to go to sleep. I go into the toilet, and while I'm gone she calls me back into the bedroom, a note of panic in her voice. She points at the broken end of a stick deodorant on my side table and accusingly asks me what it is, clearly thinking it's drugs of some sort. It takes a couple of minutes to assure me that isn't the case, and we settle down for a decent night's sleep. Only kidding, no we don't. Then comes the terrible stuff. She dozes off for 15 minutes, and on waking up again starts making out with me. Then pulls my thing out of my shorts and starts sucking on it before really amateurishly trying to tit-fuck me while giving me her best dirty talk, consisting of, "I want to make you come with my pussy big boy." And then she starts to straddle me, wiggling her panties down. As I said, I'd already decided I wouldn't be having sex with her, so I proceed to talk her out of it, which takes 10 minutes, all the while assuring her I'm not made about us not doing it. We go back to sleep again, but now whenever I move, even slightly, she pats my head and says, "Sh," and I swear one time, mommy's here, meaning I lay completely stationary until she drops off. Then she flails around in her sleep like a rag doll. When not smacking me in the face with an arm, she's flinging a leg and arm up the wall while gasping and moaning. Eventually I manage to fall asleep only to wake to find her face inches from mine, her eyes drowsy looking but awake. She proceeds to engage me in a conversation about the seriousness of our relationship, where he insists that I need to commit to her, and that even though I keep saying everything is fine, I'm not doing anything to make sure it is. She also tells me she adores me, and demands to know what I should tell her family about us. I figure the best thing to do is agree with all this, and eventually she lets up, but not before insisting that I need to see a doctor for my moods. And that's basically the way the night goes. I don't sleep for more than 10 minutes at a time, between being hot with flailing limbs, woken by her sitting bolt upright claiming, "I'm dying," because she needs a glass of water, pouring half of that glass of water down my back. Waking me up, calling me Danny, not my name, and telling me how sorry she is. I don't really feel able to get a proper night's rest. Hold on to your hats, people, because this is a doozy. One could say I walked into this, even that it wasn't really a date, because I texted him halfway through work and said, "I'm having a horrible day. Meet me for cocktails downtown after work." We met at my birthday party just a few days before, and I thought we had really hit it off, but I'd already had a specified date that night, and had just met him at the party, and didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. They were both nice guys. Anyways, I digress. He agreed to meet me downtown for cocktails at 5:30 p.m., but about an hour later asked if I could meet him across town where he worked. Heh, I should have just said no, but I really thought we had hit it off, and it was just one really out of the way bus ride. Normally I drove, but today I hadn't. I had just moved to a suburb, and the bus was pretty convenient, so I was taking it whenever possible. Since I had intended on getting drinks downtown near the bus stop, I didn't drive. Now I was taking the bus across town after my shitty day, but hey, I like the guy, right? Well, I get there. It's now 6:30 p.m., and he's nowhere near done with work. He's a barber, and he's in the middle off giving a friend a fucking 4-hour-long Jerry curl. That's right, a stinky man perm. I'm hungry, and was expecting cocktails. I'm now wondering why he didn't just tell me it was bad timing, and telling me he couldn't do it. But I figured whatever, he really likes me. He probably had the lapse of judgment for the same reason I did in taking the bus all the way out here. Now he promises he'll drive me home, and have me home by 9:30 p.m. I'm sort of stuck there now, unless I want to take the bus all the way back downtown, hungry and sober on my Friday after my shitty day. So basically, I'm in this now and dependent on him for my ride home. So, I guess I'm sitting through this perm. Better put on my smiley face. He got beer and smoked me out. Despite that I told him I was hungry, he didn't seem to care at all that I was hungry, but did think buying a higher alcohol beer was totally a good idea. So, I couldn't drink much of the beer before it started to give me a headache. You may be thinking, why didn't you just go and get food? Excellent question. There was a supermarket not too far away. I could have, I suppose. But I didn't. I waited. I waited thinking that after the perm was done he'd have the sense to take me to dinner as a sign of appreciation for coming clear across town after a shitty work day and then sitting and waiting at his work, which I was unprepared for, while he finished a perm. So now I'm starving, a little buzzed, and high with a stomach ache, tired, and with a shitty work day behind me, and the perm is fucking finally almost done. But, just when I think things are about to get good, he says to me, Oh, BTW, I have to help my friend move tonight. You don't mind, do you? Say what? We're doing what after this? I mean, I'm all buzzed now. I don't want to bus it all the way back downtown, and then all the way an hour home. I'm in my fucking work clothes, and he's roped me into moving his fucking friend. Now, I'm legitimately annoyed, but I'm stuck here. Okay. Where are we moving him to? Tent City. Oh great. We are moving someone to fucking Tent City. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Seattle area, Tent City is essentially a neighborhood of homeless people who were given a designated area to be homeless in. Are you fucking kidding me? But again, I am now stuck in this. So, we go to pick up his friend. Or so I thought. Next thing I know, he pulls in front of a house. Is this where your friend lives? No. This is my parents' house. Again. Say what? But, I'm a down girl. I'm down to meet the parents, even on a first date. Hell, this could be fun. If I wasn't all starving and high, that is. Am I going to meet anyone? Oh no. You won't meet anyone. He proceeds to get out of the car and start moving stuff from the back of his truck into the back of another truck. I didn't bother to ask why or what, but sure as shit a woman, who was obviously his mother, comes out. It took me a moment to realize she was out there as I was listening to music and fixing my makeup and just frankly stoned. Once I realized his mother was there, I figured the polite thing to do would be to get out of the car and let him introduce us, so I did. Only, he didn't introduce us. Instead, I realized he seemed very annoyed by her presence and was furiously slamming things around with an angry look on his face. He seemed to take no notice of me standing there at all. So I just stood there awkwardly with his mother, who sort of looked me up and down with an face. Understandably. After a few awkward minutes of listening to them bicker back and forth, I introduced myself. She politely shook my hand and said, "Why don't you just take those inside so they don't get rained on?" He says, "Leave me alone, MOM. He's 30 years old, BTW. Oh, get real. You're just being lazy." Then he shoots back, "Why do you always have to be such a fucking bitch?" He proceeds then to yell obscenities at his mother in a tirade for longer than I care to remember. It was so uncomfortable, I literally ran back into the car. I sat that stunned. I couldn't believe he would bitch out his mother, like a fucking 13-year-old, in front of a woman he is trying to impress on a first date. I contemplated my situation. I'm shackled to this person, doomed to help his now homeless friend move to Tent City stoned, and starving after watching him scream down his mother. He's clearly nuts, and an idiot with absolutely no regard for my personal interest, comfort, or safety. I should have just gotten a cab at that point, but I was high, so I didn't. He got in his car, and I just pretended everything was okay. He proceeded to tell me all about how he hates his mother. Just what a woman wants to hear on a first date. All about your mother issues. Then we finally go to pick up the friend. On the way, I told him I had to pee, but instead of stopping somewhere logical for me to go, he asks his friend to meet us in front of an Albertsons grocery store. I run in and find the restroom and go pee, and when I come back out, still in my work suit, by the way, his friend looks me up and down. ADN. You could just read the dismay on his face. Who I asked this stuck-up bitch? Great. Then my date does the absolutely unthinkable. He has a truck with a small back seat. I was going to offer to sit in the back because his friend was much larger than me. But before I could offer, he just flips the seat up and hollers at me to get in the back with a smile. With a smile. Like he doesn't even realize how fucking presumptuously rude and dumb that is. Really? This is how you impress a woman on a first date? Make them take the bus cross town, starve them, subject them to stinky perm, scream your mother down in front of them, rope them into helping your friend move to Tent City in her suit, and then you just expect me to get in the fucking back seat? What the motherfucking fuck? But I'm stuck now, so I get in. I'm starting to think this guy is so out of touch he may really be dangerous. I'm a little scared. Not to mention it's already 8:45 p.m. He promised to have me home by 9:30 p.m., and we haven't even started moving his friend. Fortunately, his friend seemed so not wanting to deal with me, he just postponed until the next day, so we didn't have to move him. After his friend made us wait outside his soon-to-be-not-his apartment for about 15 minutes while he decided what he was going to do, he let us know my date could help him tomorrow. Sigh of fucking relief. Could you please take me home now? He begrudgingly agreed to take me home. To be honest, after seeing him scream down his mother in a fashion rivaling my worst teenage outbursts, I was scared. I was afraid of upsetting him and having him leave me on the side of the road. I was nowhere near a viable bus stop and in a bad neighborhood. I just wanted to go home and have no problems. I got him to take me home, but he refused to leave until I kissed him goodnight. I gave him a quick kiss goodnight and literally ran for the door. My best friend's girlfriend had introduced us. The next time I saw her, she told me, "How come you never returned any of worst date ever's texts? He thought you guys really hit it off." When I told her what had gone down, she was pretty surprised, but not exactly shocked. Apparently, when she explained it to worst date ever, he was completely confused. He had thought the date went amazing, which just goes to show how out of touch he was. This probably isn't the worst story in the world, but it still infuriates me. Went out to a famous Hollywood bar and grill. There's your hint, with a girlfriend. I was 21, she was 19. Met two guys, one a troll, the other super hot, age 22. The latter was gorgeous, funny, gregarious, happened to be Hollywood royalty, or rather, the progeny thereof. Blah blah blah, and of course preferred my friend. Spent the next hour or so chatting her up, running his lines, her giggling and tittering all over the place, while I sullenly made small talk with the friend. You know that story. Somewhere during the evening, though, he decided to set his sights on me, and young as I was pretty suspicious, realizing he probably saw me as the easier mark. I mean, there was no way a guy like this was going to choose me, 5 feet 2 inches, 10 pounds overweight, relatively attractive, but not overly so, over my friend, a tall willowy blonde who bore a striking resemblance to a then famous young model. So when he asked for my number at the end of the night, I hesitantly gave it to him and assumed I'd never hear from him. Couldn't figure out his play. My friend and I both assumed he was either playing some sort of game to get closer to her, or wanted to fuck me and throw me away. He called the next day and told me he wanted to take me out on a proper date. Told me how charming and lovely I was, and he wanted to prepare a meal for me and show me a night on the town. I informed my friend of this, and pleasantly surprised, she encouraged me to go. I was skeptical. I'd never been on a proper date before. I was much more the hang out and drink type, and didn't believe this dude was actually interested in me. Still, due to the uniqueness of the situation, I agreed, and we made plans for me to come up to his place the following Friday night. I showed up to his place, a spacious condo in Beverly Hills, where he greeted me at the door with a rose and a kiss on the cheek. It kinda grossed me out. I did not trust this shit at all. Immediately felt like he was a huge fucking phony. I might be the only woman on earth who recoils at the sign of a gentleman, but that I did. Still, of course, I entered to find 2 place settings at his marble table. This lovely meal he made for me consisted of a salad made of iceberg, baby tomatoes, and Italian dressing. After we ate, me thinking, really? All the while, he suggested we go out for a cocktail. More affectation, more phoniness. What 22-year-old dude on the planet uses the term cocktail? Unless he's trying to seem suave and sophisticated to the rube, he intends to fuck at the end of the night. Again, I was grossed out, but agreed. We walked to some bar, no idea where he made a big show of talking to the doorman like a buddy, to show me he was a regular, and some sort of very big deal. We go in, he orders me a tequila sunrise, himself some sort of whiskey, and we maneuver through the crowd to find a space at the end of the bar. We stood there and chatted, which consisted of him bragging about his father, grandfather, and their money, until the drinks were drained, at which point he suggested we go back to his place. We were in the bar for about 10 minutes. So we leave. We get back to his place. I stand just inside the door with my coat on, unsure of what to do next, as he excuses himself to use the restroom. A few minutes later, I hear him calling me from a corner of the condo. Followed his voice to, of course, his bedroom, where he was lying spread-eagled in his red bikini panties. He gestured to his dick and instructed me to take off my coat and come enjoy. I said, "No, I don't think so," to which he responded, "Really? I make you a nice dinner and take you out for a drink and you don't think so? Well, your coat is already on, so have a nice night." I said, "You're kidding, right?" "Not in the least. See you around." I turned on my heel and left. And that was it. My big date with the son of a wealthy Hollywood producer. Amazing. I'm 15 minutes late for a date in the peninsula at a bar I've never been to in a city I've never been in. The guy I'm meeting seems like a functional human being, one with a good job, at Stanford, and a real, legitimate LinkedIn. We've only talked online, through an app called Tinder. I'm wearing a blue dress and heels, and I've spent more time on my hair and makeup than I'd like to admit. This is my first date since I kicked out the husbeast in May. I walk into the bar expecting to see him, but it's totally empty except for the bartender. I sit, pulling out my phone. Can I get a gin and juice, please? I'm taking my first sip and debating on text messaging him when my date throws open the front door and strides in. His man heels clack on the tile, and he sidles in next to me, all business. He's significantly shorter than I am, which is a real feat, as I top out just over 5 foot. Red flag number 1. He swore he was 5'4". He orders a drink. Do you want to go sit down? He asks, gesturing to the booths lining the back wall. I grab my drink and follow him. He skips the pleasantries and fakes a yawn to stretch his arm up and over my shoulders. He's asking me some vaguely esoteric questions. Picture a box. Describe it to me. How big is it? What is it made of? And I'm sucking up gin through a straw that's decidedly too small when he reaches his hand out and places it possessively on my knee. He runs his fingers in tight, concentric circles. It's an intimate move, one you'd initiate with someone you've known, and probably seen naked on more than one occasion. I'm feeling decidedly uncomfortable. My legs are crossed, and so are my arms. So, he looks over at me with a lilting grin on his face. Have you ever had sex in a hearse? Excuse me? I choke through the gin, at an utter loss for words. Is this what passes for dating in 2013? I stand abruptly. I've definitely got to pee. I make a beeline for the bathroom with my phone already in my hand. Ollie, you better fucking pick up, I mutter, reaching for the door handle. The rings seem to last forever. Come on, come on, come on. There's a brief silence, then a confused, hello? Oh, thank God, Oliver. I need an organ donation call, stat. Oliver is my supervising embalmer and one of my best friends. Without missing a beat, he laughs. Bad date? You have no idea. This is the worst. No problem. I'll call you back in 4 minutes. Change my name in your phone. I love you, adore you, you're the light of my life, I exclaim before hanging up. I change his contact info to the name of my funeral home, look at myself wide-eyed in the mirror, and reach for the door handle. My date is still sitting in the corner when I approach. Do you want another drink? He asks. I'd really like to take you to a private beach around here. I can't imagine anything I'd like less than to be completely alone with this man. It sounds like it could quickly become vaguely day-trapey. Before I open my mouth to answer, the phone rings. I pick it up, mouthing, work sorry. I head for the door, and he follows closely, eavesdropping. California Organ Donation Network, intones Oliver. Is this Heather Hernandez? We've worked with you before, and it looks like you're the go-to person for this funeral home. I've got a full donation for tonight that needs to be done in your prep facility. Long bones, tissue, and skin. So it's gonna be a long night, is what you're telling me? Probably 8 hours, at a guess. I manage to keep a straight face through the rest of the conversation. As I hang up, I shake my head at my date, looking crestfallen. So sorry, but I've actually got to head back to the East Bay. A funeral director is always on call, Yano? He walks over to his car and slams the door, tires screeching as he pulls out. I've stopped counting the red flags because there's too many of them. As I head back into the bar for another drink, I wonder why I put so much effort into blowing him off. Next sucky date, I'll be quick to just tell the dude to quit being a creep. So I had this crush on a girl, which I've had for quite some time. But we rarely spoke to each other. We'll call her H. H and I share only one class together, and to my luck, I get a seat close to her. Eventually, her and I start talking more and more. Over Facebook, we started talking a lot. We probably exchanged over 500 messages there, and topics ranged from school to personal lives. We exchanged a bunch of secrets and got to know each other pretty well. Anyways, we are talking about her parents one day and how they are somewhat overprotective. She makes comments on how they wouldn't let her do this and that. She then tells me that they established a dating age for her at 16, which she is. So the next day we start talking again like usual. Things lead to the next, and we decide to have lunch together. Over lunch, I teach her things that I know on the piano. It went well, and we decided to have lunch 3 more times. Things continue to escalate, and I'll point out that it wasn't always me that started the conversations. It was maybe 1/3 her, 2/3 me. Anyways, this happens over a month. So we talk again one day about finals and how we're going to study. When she says that we should study together, this was a huge green light for me, and we study the next day. We meet up after school and study. We really didn't study at all. We just talked back and forth. I made one joke that made her cry of laughter. It went really well. So, a week passes, and we make another date to study. Same thing happens, and we don't study again. Midway through the session, I inform her that I have a big secret to tell her, but I am unsure if I should. She wants me to, and near the end I tell her. Basically, I talked about this really pretty girl that I liked, and how we have been hanging out a lot recently. She's giving me all the signs, etc. It was super obvious that I was talking about her. I then concluded with should I tell her or not. I also asked H if she had been in the same situation as well. She replied, yes, tell her, and yeah, I am in the same situation right now. So, I ask her out, and she says yes. She gives me her phone number, and all goes well. School ends, and during the month of June, we exchange somewhere around 800 texts. Each week we try and schedule our date, but we are both very busy, and we were unable to get to it until last night. So last night, she didn't get off work till 5, so we had to see a late movie at 7. I really tried to push for dinner or ice cream before, so we wouldn't just sit in front of a screen for 2 hours. But claimed that she didn't want to, because she wanted to save her money for college. I told her I'd pay, but whatever. So no dinner, just a movie. We meet up, start hitting it off again, I'm making her laugh, etc. We go to the concessions, where I buy popcorn. She said that she really didn't want anything. Whatever. So we go into the movie. Edge of Tomorrow. About a quarter of the way through the movie, I decide to make my move. I go for the arm around the shoulder. But she shot me down hard. My arm literally was on her head for about 20 seconds before she turned to me and shook her head. That nearly killed me. I was astonished. I immediately stopped eating the popcorn, stopped thinking about the movie and everything. I was shocked. So we sit there, watching the movie for the next hour or whatever. I can't even laugh at the jokes or anything going on in it. The movie ends, and we go back to the lobby. There we sit down and talk for about 10 minutes before our parents come to get us. Small chit-chat until the last 4 minutes. I say, you didn't like the whole arm thing? And she tells me that she thought that the date was to get to know each other better. What the hell? I say that I am so confused, that she gave me all the signs. We talked for so long, went on 2 study dates, 3 lunch dates, exchanged over 1,500 messages, etc. I then specifically mentioned the whole secret thing, where I confessed my affection to her, and she said yes. She said that she was shocked that I had asked, and didn't know that I was coming at her with romantic intentions the whole time. She then said that she didn't know what to say, and said yes to spare me pain. I am pretty pissed at this point. Pissed off, confused, shocked, shaking. I go into great detail about how it's better to be upfront about it, saying that telling me all of this now is the worst situation to be in. Anyways, our parents arrive. I tell her that we can still be friends, and she agrees, and we go our separate ways. What the hell, guys and gals? Did I misinterpret signs? She lead me on so dang hard. I think I feel terrible because of the anticipation as well. Waiting a month for the date and thinking that it would go so well. I really thought I was going to date this girl for a long time. I had things planned out after the first date. I knew what I was going to get her for her birthday, etc. I'm stunned, shocked, astonished. I feel terrible, and am still trying to comprehend all of this. Was I right? Was she right? I dunno. It's over now. A lot of these are first dates. Mine is not, but I'll contribute anyway. Background. I'd been going on casual dates with this girl from work for about a month. Maybe once a week we'd get a beer and just chat. We were a great match. She was smart and loved talking about literature and philosophy. I was raised to be a gentleman, which she really admired. Really, she seemed like an adult, and at 22, that was a big thing for me. But she wasn't looking for a relationship, despite telling me that if she was ready for one, I would be an instant candidate. No problem, I enjoy her company, we keep it casual and take things slow. There's clearly a build-up going on, and we kiss, etc. The story, fast forward about a month, and she invites me to a party that one of her friends is throwing. Now by this time I'd learned that she was a completely different person in real life that she was with her friends. Her friends were the kind of people who really thought Project X could happen, and did their best to get themselves killed by 30. They were morons and children. But they were her friends. So I said sure, thinking best case scenario I meet anyone that she knows that I can get along with. Worst case scenario, I can make sure she's safe and be a DD. I'm not going to tell you the story of the whole night, because frankly it's a horror show. What I will tell you is what she did during that night. Number 1. Some point someone found out that I'd never shotgunned a beer. So everyone at the party decided now was a grand time to do so. So we all shotgun a beer, my first of the night, and she immediately starts vomiting everywhere. No problem, I think. That's one of the most disgusting things I've done. I can't blame her. So she's recovering, and I bring her some water and paper towels to clean herself up, and some for myself to clean the mess she's made up, as she is by this point way beyond the point where she can take care of it. She freaks out, tells me to go away, and storms off. Half of me thinks there's something going on. The other half thinks she's just embarrassed and really drunk, so whatever. Number 2. It's getting late and people are starting to leave, and at this point I haven't seen her for about 45 minutes. We're in a 1-story house, the backyard, and the garage. There's not a whole lot of places she could be hiding. Considering the amount she's had by now, I'm kind of concerned she's either wandered into the night or otherwise missing and in need of help, so I go looking for her. I find her in the back room straddling a guy and making out with him like she needs him to breathe. As if that wasn't a kick in the balls enough, this guy wasn't really part of the party. He'd been sitting in the corner the entire 5 hours that we'd been there, playing Dr. Mario and Galaga and saying nothing to anyone. I figured he was the roommate or older brother of the host, didn't know anyone, but still wanted to do shit in his own house, so I wasn't too bothered by him throughout the night. Until she decided that the least social guy in the building was the dude she needed to choke with her tongue. Number 3. All of this comes to pass, we leave. I drive her home because she's way too far gone to walk, much less operate a vehicle, and get her to the door. I'm obviously confused at this point, as for 2 months we'd been seeing each other. I'd kept my aggression turned down during those 2 months, but it was clear that we were turning into an item, albeit at a snail's pace. So I ask her what we are, if she just wants to be friends, or in general what's the connection between us. She says, and I quote, "Rambler Ant, I'm out of your league." It was my first date. I remember it like one might remember being raped by a rhinoceros. I worked at a Chinese restaurant and didn't make much money. I had saved 2 paychecks because I wanted to ask out this girl in my class. 3 days before the weekend, I ask her out to dinner and a movie. I'm 16. So is she. She's skinny, smiles embarrassed smiles, really meek, quiet, but she was beautiful. My brother and sister-in-law are my guardians at this point in my life. I swear to God my sister-in-law was trying to cock-block me. They wanted me to look so nice for my first date. I told them it was a girl into heavy metal, not some pale farmer's daughter who only listens to Christian music. They wouldn't hear no about it. My sister-in-law made me wear a sweater vest on the date. Up till this point, my only experience with sweater vest was to tease people who wore them. She even tried to get me to wear a necktie, and at this point, I was noped the fuck out. I said I was under no circumstances going in public dressed like that. We compromised to me just wearing the sweater vest. I don't have a license yet, so my brother is the one choffering us to the movies. We were going to eat at Ruby Tuesdays across the street after the movie. It's go time. We pull up to her house. She's wearing her toys in the attic black t-shirt and blue jeans with holes in the knees and black and red canvas tennis shoes. Her hair is down and rippling like ramen noodles, only prettily. She looks at me and is turning red, trying to keep from laughing in my face. My response was to mutter, "Yeah, I know," morosely. I'm pretty sure my expression rather closely resembled the ashamed look of a golden retriever who's just shit on the living room rug and has gone off to die of embarrassment. We go to the movie. Who do we run into? My date's best friend. She informs me that she has a date with 2 friends and that she can't join us. I was relieved at this, not realizing that she was there on purpose and that this was referred to as a safety date to make sure I wasn't some creepy jock type that was going to roofie her and have my way with her. We enjoyed the movie a lot. Afterwards, we crossed the parking lot and headed for the restaurant. I had calculated how much money I was going to need to pay for our meals and dessert and should have had $15 left over. I did some research. We get over to Ruby Tuesday. We get a table in the corner by the front window, and we're talking and joking and making fun of my sweater vest, when who shows up out of nowhere? Safety bitch. She joins us without asking, declares she's hungry too. Tells me, "You got a job, right?" I say I do, so she orders herself some food. We talk amongst us, and I want is for the girl to go away. I want to crash and burn on my own, not in front of witnesses. I struggle through them whispering and looking at me while laughing, and when the waiter brings our food, I'm relieved. We eat. I think everything is going well despite the intrusion of safety bitch. I look at the clock on the wall and realize my brother will be there at any time to pick us up. I make a comment of that. Safety bitch gets up, hugs my date, and says she'll see us at school on Monday. She leaves. We talk for 10 minutes in the restaurant when I see my brother arrive. I call for the check. The waiter brings it, and it's $45. My face goes white. I'm pulling out my wad of cash and counting it out, but I only have $36. I was so embarrassed. My date pulls 20 out of her purse and adds it to my own. We pay and tip and are walking out, not even holding hands. She's laughing at me. I don't know what went wrong. I went through our meals again in my head, plus tax, plus drinks. I couldn't figure out what went wrong. How could this happen? We're riding back to her house, my brother driving. He's doing his best to embarrass me in front of her. She's laughing her ass off at my red-faced look of horror, as nothing is off limits to my brother back then. We drop her off, and she shakes my hand. Just shook it like we worked in an office somewhere. I go home with my brother. I don't say a word. He's teasing me still. I get home. My sister-in-law is asking how the date went, but there's like a sly smile on her face. I lie and say fine. I go to my room, change out of the horrid sweater vest, then go to bed. It's 3 a.m, and I can't figure out what went wrong. I'm struggling. I went over the cost of the meals again and again. It didn't make sense. Then I realized why you already realize. Safety bitch left and stuck me with the bill for her meal. It's 3 a.m. I call my date. She's still awake. I tell her that I finally figured out why I didn't have enough for dinner. She's laughing and tells me she already knew why. Her friend had asked to borrow money for dinner, and that was why Safety bitch left without paying. But instead of telling me, my date thought it would be fun to watch me squirm. She said she never told me because she wanted to see how long it'd take me to figure out what went wrong. I didn't find it as funny as her. I found out 10 years later that my sister-in-law had been molested as a teen by her date, and she made me wear the sweater vest to guarantee I didn't get lucky. She did indeed sabotage me. My brother, who would have teased me anyway, did it more than usual because his wife, my sister-in-law, made him. She did not want me ruining some young girl's life by having sex as a teenager. Joke's on her. Me and my date ended up fighting over this a few days later, and to get back at her, I fucked her best friend, Safety bitch, in the drafting room during shop class. I hate when people interfere in shit that doesn't concern them. My first date at the age of 16. I already went out with a girl before, but since I met her over mutual friends, this was the first time I had to get to know someone by going on a date. She seemed like a nice girl. We both were in our metal/rock music phase, and so had lots to talk and laugh about. One late evening in December, I got a message from her saying that she'd like to meet and drink a beer together. She actually called it a date. It was about -5 to 10 degrees Celsius, already dark. I had no one to drive me there, around 7 kilometers, and public transportation wasn't available at this hour. Like most 16-year-olds, I was naive and typical teenage boy desperate. That said, got some layers of clothing and went out secretly. At the time I arrived at the bar, my nose was near numb, and she was nowhere to be seen. I thought it would be rude to order a drink without her, so I told the waiter and sat down. After the first hour, he made me get out so he could have the seats for paying customers. Another hour later, she arrived by car with a wide and intense grin on her face. She suggested to go to another bar cause the one we were standing in front was too crowded. Since I just wanted to feel my body again, I agreed. After heating up, my mood began to get better, and we ordered our drinks. The conversation was lively, and back then I thought this would work out, and I could enjoy the rest of the night. Oh, I was wrong. Half through the first drink, she told me to go to her place because we could talk better there and her parents aren't home. Even teenage me knew what this means. So another walk, another 5-ish kilometer. After the first, she told me she was cold, so I gave her my coat. Then her neck was cold, so I gave her my scarf, SRSLY. This girl wasn't dressed for the weather. Again, half frozen, we reached her place and went in. As she said, no one else was home, and after some talk about generic stuff, we started to make out. At this point, 16-year-old me would have still called this date an astounding success, but like you may have already guessed, the front door opened in the exact second we were moving over to the giant couch in the living room. She panicked, took me to her room as fast as she could, pushed me in her cramped closet, and told me to hide in there. I swear I don't make this shit up. I only heard pretty loud and aggressive mumbling in there, but her parents seemed to know her plays already, and found me after a mere minute or so. Needless to say, her father kicked me out, literally, while I still heard her mother arguing with the girl about how she girl brings another guy home every other week and she mother wouldn't pay for pregnancy tests anymore. I can't tell you people anymore what bugged me the most. That I couldn't get laid, that I just seemed to be disposable, or that I had to walk all the way home without my jacket or scarf. Another story. So, I went out for drinks with this girl who I've gone out with a bunch. We have a great time, have some beers, eat some nachos, and have a good time. After we finish up at the pub, she suggests we get a bottle of rum and some Slurpees and continue drinking in a local park. It's a nice night and all. Anyways, we drink the rum and hang out. I realize that she's getting pretty drunk, and I should probably just walk her home. We weren't all that far from her house. As I am walking her home, we cut through a post-secondary campus, and she just has a panic attack, like full-on hyperventilating, an incomprehensible sort of panic attack. I try calming her down. She just keeps screaming at me to fuck off, but I'm not just going to leave her there, so I just sit there next to her. Out of nowhere, she just snaps and screams at me, "Get away from me," and she leaves her purse on the ground and runs away. I pick up her purse and go to track her down because she's really drunk and I just want her to get home. I find her collapsed in a corner. I say, "All right, let's get you back, go your house." She screams at me again. They're following US. Well, at this point I don't know what's going on, but I'm determined that I'm not letting her be by herself at this moment and try to coax her into going home again. We continue walking, but she's got full-on crazy eyes and is muttering about spies being around us and that we are being watched. As we continue this journey, she starts screaming at me. "You don't know what it's like to be gang raped." I know. Now keep in mind we are now walking down a street with people around. I ask her to calm down. She grabs me by my face and says, "You need to follow me if you want to live." I tell her she needs to calm down again and maybe suggest that I might actually have to call for medical assistance. Well, she goes further off the deep end at this point, starts shoving me around, almost pushes me into traffic. My glasses did come off and fly into traffic and get destroyed at this point. Eventually, I do convince her to head home. However, I was berated the entire time, and she keeps screaming crazy shit at me. As I am almost at her house, she grabs my face and says, "What's my name?" I respond with her name, and she says, "That's not my name. I am Alexandra Romanoff." "Say it." I don't want to get murdered, so I say her name back, and she keeps making me say her new name. Eventually, she grabs my face again and says, "Know my name if you want to live. Live it, breath it, speak it." At this point, we are finally at her house. She tells me that I am going to die on my way home, and that it was meant to be. She got into her house. I went home. I had been crushing on this girl for months. She knew it, and I knew she liked me too, but she never would go out on a date with me for some reason. I think it was a clique thing, as I wasn't one of the cool kids. We would always flirt like crazy, but never took it any further despite my many attempts. Finally, one day, she agrees out of the blue, and we schedule a movie for Friday. We had never really had any time when it was just myself and her. It was always in a social situation, and only when we found ourselves in a semi-isolated part of a party or whatnot. She would always tone it way down in front of her friends. Anyway, I pick her up, and it's like night and day. She's incredibly giddy/excited, and even kisses me when I meet her at the door. We laugh and flirt for the whole drive, and everything is right with the world. At some point before this day, we had decided that it would be a good, high movie, and I promised to bring some weed. We had gotten caught up in the flirting/laughing on the drive, and when we finally got to the parking lot, I said, "Oh yeah, did you want to smoke before we go in?" She agreed, and we shared AJ in the car. Mind you, this is in the middle of summer, and my POS car at the time didn't have AC. It was hot enough just driving, but after sitting in the car in the sun, idle for 5 minutes, we were both thoroughly baked, both ways, smiley face. When we finally walked into the theater, it was like a slap in the face walking into the AC'd lobby, similar to the momentary shock you get jumping into a cold pool. We got our tickets, and I noticed she looked pale, but didn't say anything. When we got to the concession stand, I ordered popcorn and asked her what she wanted to drink. She says, "I can't see," and is getting all wobbly. My THC-addled brain can't process this, and I say, "You want a Pepsi?" She then proceeds to collapse. It's a Friday night at a large theater, so there are tons of people around, and you can hear the collective audible gasp when this happens. I'm just standing there in a stupor, blazed out of my mind, and people are asking, "Is she okay? Does she have any medical conditions?" I think at best I stammered out, I don't know. It doesn't help to be high in these situations. Thankfully, after a minute or so, which felt like an hour, she wakes up. Apparently she is one of those people who deal with embarrassment with anger, so once she gets up and sees everyone staring at her, she runs off. I'm trying to walk with her, helping her stay upright as she is still staggering, but she keeps telling me to leave her alone. I finally get her to the car after she rebuffs all my, "Are you okay? What can I do?" questions, and she passes out again. She sleeps while I just sit there watching, making sure she's still breathing, etc. When she does wake up, she immediately asks to be taken home. The bitchiness is gone now, but she won't talk, so we have an incredibly awkward silence for 20 minutes on the drive home. I finally get to her driveway, and she has tears in her eyes and says, "I'm sorry I ruined our date, Seraph." I try to explain that it's not a big deal at all, and I just wish she'd talk to me. But she basically runs out of the car and goes inside. This was pre-cell phone days, and while I think I had her number, it was probably written on a piece of paper somewhere that I couldn't find. So I just accepted my fate and went home crestfallen. I kept hoping to bump into her at some gathering, but didn't see her for probably a month. When I did finally find her, all I wanted to do was to rush over and hug her, but she would actively avoid eye contact and stay huddled with her friends. This continued until I just gave up, but I still think about her to this day. I was in my early 20s and nowadays would have not put up with any of the shit I did, lol. He picked me up from my house. I walked out wearing heels, and he made me go back inside and put on flats because apparently I was taller than him with heels on. Nowadays, that is when the date would be over for me, lol. But I did it. We drive to the restaurant. It's a casual spot, kind of like a pub, but with fancier food. We sit down and order our drinks, and there's a table next to us of like 6 guys all wearing jeans and camo or plaid, hillbilly-looking types. My date starts loudly talking shit about how ugly their clothes are, and the guys keep looking over at us like WTF. I told my date to stop because he was about to get a country boy beat down, lol. The waitress comes to take our order, and he orders for me, and it's something I don't want, so I say oh no thanks and order something else. After the waitress left, he was literally red in the face, fuming, not saying anything, and just staring at me. I awkwardly drank my beer until he said, "Don't you ever do that to me again," and launched into a rant about how I embarrassed him in front of everyone. He was being so loud and everyone was staring at us, and I just wanted to melt into my seat, lol. The food comes and he asks for the check. I offered to pay my half because I did not want to ever see him again, and I didn't want to give him a reason to feel like I owe him something. He goes off on me again about how I need to be trained to be a better woman, how I'm embarrassing him again, just tearing into me. I excused myself to go to the bathroom, which is across the building and around a corner out of view. I was frantically texting everyone I knew trying to get a ride home, and planned on leaving without him seeing. One of the country boys from the table next to us followed me to the bathroom and knocked on the door asking if I was okay. I came out and spoke to him, and he offered to drive me home, so I took it. I get in this guy's old beat-up truck, and he gives me a cigarette and takes me home and makes sure I got into my house before he took off. Lovely guy. 5 minutes later, my phone starts blowing up, and it's my date. I guess he started losing his shit when he realized I was gone, and found out I got a ride home from one of the guys he was insulting earlier. Accuses me of being a whore and sleeping with this guy. I blocked his number. He shows up at my house. Now he's banging on the front door so hard I'm afraid it's going to come off its hinges. I lived with 3 male roommates at the time, but none of them were home, so I called the house group chat and begged for one of them to come home. Thankfully, my one roommate was just down the road, and he came right home. He's like 6 feet 4 inches, 300 pounds, so he scared my terrifying date away. After that, he would randomly show up at our house and bang on the door and try all the windows to see if any of them were unlatched. Looking back, I should have just called the fucking cops. Thankfully, he gave up on me after about a month. Probably found a new woman to terrorize. So we have plans for the date, and then the day of texts me that she's having performance anxiety about it basically, and asking if we can reschedule. I say I get it, no problem, and I think that's it. An hour or so later, she texts me to say she changed her mind and wants the date back on. Cool. Except not cool. She got her liquid confidence, and that's why she changed her mind. I show up and she is drunk. I'm already feeling not great, but didn't want her to be this drunk out in public in a city where someone could take advantage, so we get some fries and she asks if I want a beer. Sure. So she gets one too. And I'm like, maybe you don't need to drink more. She says it's fine. Okay. She asks if I want to get out of there, so we pay, and she still has half her beer left. She says we're going to dip out the back, and she's going to bring it. I say, hey, maybe don't do that. She insists it's fine. I say, okay. I'm going to pretend I barely know you if anyone stops us. We make it back to her place, and she leads me through a maze of a building where everything looks exactly the same, and I have no fucking idea how we got to her room. There was nothing really notable to lead me out. This matters later. We get to her room, and she talks about herself and how she produces music, and she wants to show me a song. Cool, I make music too. I'm always down to listen to new stuff. She can't connect her laptop to the Bluetooth thing correctly, but she is so insistent on making sure it connects because she wants me to hear. Okay, so I lie there on her bed making awkward small talk while I wait for her to get it working for like a half hour. Eventually she gets it, shows me the song, it's fine. She puts on other mood music and is lying next to me. Okay, so I forgot to mention I'm trans. That's important here. I'm trans, she's gay. Honestly, never really a problem for me. I'm attractive and do fine. She starts telling me that she kind of hates penises. No offense, but doesn't mind that I have one. Asks if she can go down on me. I'm like, not really after that slam dunk of a pickup line. And also definitely not while you're blackout drunk, and I'm just a bit buzzed. She's like, no, it's fine. I don't mind, you're cute, etc. And she starts kissing me along my neck while on top of me. I'm like, and contemplating what to do about this when she just falls asleep. She passed out drunk on top of me. So I'm just lying there messing around on my phone and listening to her music while formulating a plan of what the fuck to do. Eventually I decide to get her off of me, and I try poking her to wake her up and say that I'm gonna leave, but she is dead to the world. I literally can't wake her. So I make sure to leave her on her side so she doesn't throw up and choke herself or anything and make my way out of her room. Right as I'm trying to make my escape, I realize I have no idea where the fuck to go to get out. As I'm panicking, her roommate comes out into the common room and is like, and I'm like, I'm your roommate's date. How do I get out of here? She briefly explains, and I say thanks and tell her to check in on her roommate so she doesn't choke herself in her sleep. I eventually find my way out, no idea how, and I text her that I head home and hope she feels better in the morning. She apologizes profusely the next morning, saying she is so fucking sorry for getting so drunk. I'm pretty understanding, and I'm like, it's okay, I get it. She asks if we can have a do-over, and I don't remember what I said, but it was basically a no without saying it in a mean way. I do feel pretty bad. Maybe we could have been friends or something if she wasn't belligerently drunk on the first date. But yeah, that one's kind of hard to come back from. Let's see. No, it's not the date on which my high school girlfriend decided that me moving away to college instead of marrying her and staying in my tiny hometown was a really bad idea, and that sucker punching me and driving us both to our deaths off a cliff, where we'd previously been sitting enjoying the sunset, was the win. That's two. Shakespearean. And it's not the date where my date didn't go home after dinner, but instead spent the night sleeping in her car in my driveway waiting for me, because we're meant to be together. That's two. Fatal attraction. It's gotta be this one. I had a relationship of convenience with Colleen, an unspeakably cute Irish girl. She worked in HR for a client of mine, and we met when the client decided they needed to internally staff a position to support a project I'd done for them. We hit it off, and rapidly became each other's number one call when carnal desires reared their head. When she called me, I was delighted. That shifted a bit as she asked for a favor. Her sister was staying with her for a bit, and could I take her out for the evening? I was hesitant. I remembered her sister, short, spiky, flaming red hair, a plus, rail-thin, angry, strident, not pluses, wicked smart, super plus. Colleen explained that she'd really changed a lot since I'd seen her a few years ago, and that I wouldn't be disappointed, and that if I were, she'd make it up to me. Okay, I'm in. When I rang the doorbell, I didn't recognize Sheila at first. The red hair was there, but wow, she had changed. Generous curves, a vast bosom, the spiked do gone and shoulder-length curls replacing it. It's like I was seeing a totally different woman. And she was super friendly and delighted to see me. Big hug, quick kiss, grabbed her purse, and off we went. Dinner, drinks, a walk around the park, lots of very entertaining conversation, some pretty serious flirting. And I learned that she'd discovered a few years back that she was hyperthyroid and had a couple of other glandular disorders as a result, and that with treatment, she was now in fact very different. I was delighted. Eventually, she slipped into my lap, kissed me, and said, "Let's go back to the apartment." Shortly, we were in the living room. She dropped my pants to the floor and pushed me down on the couch, and pulled her dress off and straddled me, and was telling me in pretty explicit terms exactly how she wanted the rest of the night to go. As she was kissing me, hard, for the first time, there was an explosion of drywall and wood as the front door shattered. A short, stocky, very angry woman stood in the debris, breathing hard. She saw us, pointed at Sheila and screamed something unintelligible, then broke a bar stool and using a leg from it, ran at us, knocking Sheila off me, and alternating beating the two of us with it, yelling, "That's my pussy! Keep the fuck away from her." I'm trying to stand up, get the stool leg away from her, protect Sheila and navigate with my pants around my ankles, all at the same time. Just about the time I'd grabbed her, and was wrestling for control of the stick, for police officers burst through the door with guns drawn. Now picture this, naked crying woman cowering in the corner. Angry fully clothed woman fighting with a half-naked man. What's your immediate conclusion, officer? Yeah, good times. Eventually, it was all sorted out. There was no happy ending. Sheila was back in town because she was on parole from an embezzlement charge. She'd met Grace, the short angry woman, in prison, and they'd become an item. Grace was on parole for second-degree manslaughter, pled down for murder. Her second trip through the system. Grace had been trying to get back with Sheila. Sheila wasn't feeling the love. Grace had followed us all night and beat up the doorman to find out which apartment we were headed for. The doorman called the police, explaining their seemingly rapid arrival. I was released, but both Grace and Sheila went away with the officers, heading back to prison for various parole violations. And Colleen? She didn't speak to me for months over returning home to crime scene tape, a completely missing front door, and a wrecked living room. So I'm living in the Bay Area, working as a management consultant, and I buy a new car. I'm a bit of a performance enthusiast, so it was a nice one but nothing too ostentatious, but it was at a nice dealership. In buying cars, you often deal with the service counter, and at that service counter was a painfully cute brunette. So, of course, I make sure that I get everything done that I needed to and struck up a conversation during one visit. Talked a bit, and asked her if she wanted to hang out sometime. She agreed, said it sounded fun. We exchange info. I agree to pick her up later that week. Tell her it's a casual date, fun, nothing formal. So I pick her up, her roommate answers the door and says Lelia is running a little late, to come in and wait, shouldn't be long. 45 minutes later, Lelia comes out, but she's looking good, so I'm not too angry. But damn, 45 minutes late for a casual date, but okay. So we go to a mini golf place, a nice one, and we play a little bit. She's cute but annoying. She was a screamer, and that is one thing that rides my nerve. When a woman screams at every little thing, just random shrieks because it's fun. She misses close, she screams, she sinks one, she screams, something happens with a hazard, she screams. We're talking, and there is a difference in educational levels and interests. Career goals are a bit different. That kind of thing. She's also younger than I am by a few years. I was like 26 at that time, I think. She was probably 22. So different levels of maturity. But it's not a total disaster yet. I'm just mildly annoyed, but being nice. About halfway through the game, she orders a beer. No big deal, I order one too. Then she orders another at the end of the game. I tell her that I was thinking a nearby restaurant that's pretty good, she agrees. We head over there. We walk in and she exclaims, "Let's sit at the bar." Okay, let's do that. I will say that any time your date, when you're in a sort of trendy place, yells shots. It's a bad sign. I order some appetizers, she orders a mixed drink, which by the time the food arrives has turned into shots of tequila IRC. I've tried to tell her to back off the drinking, slow down, all that stuff. She says I don't know how to have a good time. Suffice it to say, she gets hammered. Hammered enough to be obnoxious with the server, and generally look like a fool. At one point, she gets up to use the restroom and loudly exclaims, "Gotta break the seal," followed by a woohoo sound, to which people all look at. Understand that this isn't a party bar or restaurant. It's sort of a cool place with craft cocktails and decent food. I wanted to burst into flames. One woman at the table overlooks at me and says, "I'm so sorry," and her presumed boyfriend/husband goes, "Ouch dude, cut and run." Do you have any idea how embarrassing someone has to be to bring people into commenting on your shitty date? Pretty freaking embarrassing. She left her phone on the table, and I had to. I picked it up, it wasn't locked. Found her roommate's number, and called her. Told her this was Richard, Lelia's date, and she was plastered. Utterly ridiculous. Her response? "Yeah, that happens, she likes to have a good time. Just bring her home, I guess it's gonna get worse." Lelia comes out of the bathroom, still reeling, and stops our server and says, "I want another shot." I'm like, "No, we need to get going." She then calls me a wuss, and that I'm uptight. I lead her out, drop about $120 on the table, knowing that we'll cover with a generous tip and lead her out of the restaurant. We get going. She wants to hit a bar and party, and I want nothing of the sort. She says, "Oh, we could go back your place," and makes this weird hip gyrating motion with a sound I can only describe as eh. No, not happening. 1. I'm not going to fuck some drunk girl. 2. I don't want this crazy person in my rather nice apartment. I tell her I'm taking her home. She gets angry, calls me a pussy, and that I don't know how to have fun. Then she says she doesn't feel so good, to which I pull over and was about to help her out, and she says it's coming, and I roll down the window and she hangs out and proceeds to upchuck down the outside of my car. My brand new ISF. I wasn't amused. At this point, I'm past being polite. I open the door for her. She finishes giving flight to her dinner. I get her back in the car and drive her home. She starts crying and saying what a wreck she is. I agree with that. As I said, I'm past being polite. She starts crying more, and I bite my lip and drive her home without saying another word. I'm pissed off. I mean angry. Pissed like a bear. I take her up to her place as she stumbles and cries, not letting her fall and knock on her door. Her roommate answers and takes her inside, apologizes, and Lelia turns around and says something incomprehensible. I make my escape, then find a car wash and find myself washing vomit off of my car in the dark, alone. That was a hell of a moment. Still, by far the worst date I've ever been on. I've been using Tinder for 3 to 4 years now, and I've always been very lucky. However, yesterday was a different story. Climax of the story. I'm in my date's bedroom. She's lying on her bed, drugged and intoxicated. She takes off her top, now topless, grabs my neck and starts kissing me. Her mom, who is standing there, leaves the room to give me some privacy to do what can only be considered a date rape. Flashback a day earlier, we matched on Tinder. I suggested we skip the long chats and go for a drink. She suggested we chat on the phone first. We did for an hour, and it was nice. Some laughs, some flirting, and we agreed to spend the next morning at the beach. We met. Everything is going great, and all signs are saying we'll end up having crazy sex very soon. Left the beach, had lunch, and then agreed to go back to my place. She said she needed to pass by her place to change and take some stuff. No problem. She introduced me to her mom, her dog, her cat, and some neighbors. Getting too cozy for a Tinder date. Then she said, "Change of plans. My mom is going to spend the night at my brother's place. Would you mind spending the night here instead?" I thought, why not? I'm getting lucky, so I don't care. She started preparing dinner, and I started drinking. Turned out her mom is going nowhere, and I had too much to drink. I can't drive back home. So I'm stuck with them for the night. That's when things started to get crazy. Dinner table had prawns and oysters with bacon, which I hate. So I started eating the prawns when my date offered some oysters. I politely declined and said I was happy with the prawns. She insisted so much it got awkward, so I took it. She asked me if I liked it. I smiled and said nothing. She started getting angry and yelled at me that I should be more direct and speak up. I told her I didn't like it. It might be good, but it's not for me. She started yelling at me and demanding an explanation why I don't like it. That's when her mom jumped in and tried to defuse the situation. To my surprise, my date grabbed the prawns plate and threw it across the room straight into the wall. Then she stormed away into her room. That's when her mom explained to me that she'd been in and out of rehab because of depression with 2 suicide attempts, and that she was on medication and was not supposed to have any alcohol. Now I'm feeling really sorry for her. She came out of her room, laughing as if nothing happened, and brought some dessert and more champagne. Suddenly, she stood up and challenged me into a fight. MMA fight. She knew I've done MMA for over 10 years. She started throwing punches at my chest and stomach, and then to my face. I was blocking or slipping all punches and asking her to stop. She got really vicious and started adding kicks to her attack. I grabbed her arms, put my weight on her, and took her to the ground. She totally collapsed and lay there unconscious. I shouldn't drive back home because I had 7 to 8 drinks. I can't take a taxi and leave my car because there's a big chance she'll trash it. But I decided, fuck it, I'll drive back home. I carried her to her bed when she opened her eyes, smiled, and then all of a sudden took her top off, grabbed my neck and started kissing me. Her mom, who was standing there, left the room to give me privacy to do what can only be considered a date rape. I pushed her away and started walking backwards out of the room when she gave me a final kick to the stomach goodbye. Not crazy enough? I woke up this morning to a few missed calls from my date and a couple of messages with a casual apology and a couple of ideas for our second date. Another bad date story to add. What I noticed first was the pile of tiny plastic eyedroppers that was building up in front of us while we sat side by side at the bar. I don't know why it took me so long to see this. And I don't know how he fit all those little bottles in his pants pocket. There must have been 100 of them, easily. I'm not kidding you. Literally every 30 seconds or so, he'd pull out 2 eyedroppers and very swiftly tilt his head back and lubricate his eyeballs. He was so fast, and we were having such engrossing discussions, that it took me at least a half hour to even realize what he was doing. I politely asked for an explanation. He told me he had had eye surgery for a serious eye condition he developed, and while that surgery saved his eyesight, he was left with this burden of watering his eyes approximately twice per minute. Poor fellow. Being a contact lens wearer, I can certainly relate to the discomfort of dry eyes. It sucks, but I was a bit taken aback by the fact that he seemed to expect the bartender to clean up the eyedroppers. I hope he left him a large tip for that. The poor bartender had to collect them all with a napkin each time the pile built up to roughly 2 inches in height. I'd say there were about 4 piles over the course of the evening. But that's not all. Towards the end of the date, I pulled out my phone to see 6 missed calls from my mother. I knew something was horribly wrong, because my grandmother had recently fallen ill and was at a nursing home. I excused myself and called my mother back, fearing the worst. My grandmother had died an hour ago. Tearfully, I went back inside and told him I had to go. I hope he didn't think it was an excuse for me being freaked out by the eyedroppers. My grandmother really did pass away. It may also have been the weirdest date ever for him, given that I had to bag out of it due to a death in my family that occurred during the actual date. We are now married. Just kidding. I never saw him again after that night, though he did send me a few texts to cheer me up in the ensuing days. He was a really nice guy. Many moons ago, before I was a happily married lass, a pair of friends set me up on a date with a buddy of theirs. He was an actor/musician. I had his album, burnt via my mates, so don't get excited. This is not a celebrity in disguise story. This is a celebrity wannabe and absolutely no attempt to disguise its story. We'd met briefly at a party, and I'd been suitably intrigued. I was around 18, he was early 30s, and I must confess his music was very good. I wasn't so silly as to think he was the next big thing, but you'd have to be a massive jerk not to acknowledge that he clearly had immense talent. I had a history of dating older fellas, but I was also very no-nonsense and skeptical of ego and self-absorption. So, the date is suggested. I agree and suggest we see a play happening nearby, but I was keen to stick to my usual blind-ish date rule. Always be the driver. It stops you getting drunk, you have control over the way the night rolls, and most importantly, you usually pick them up from their house. And brother, can you learn a lot from a man's house? In this instance, it was a relatively small flat, okay, he'd only recently moved to the city. The furniture was mostly disposable, again, he'd recently moved. But the strangest thing was that the TV was on when I arrived. "Take a seat," he said, gesturing to the unfolded card table in the corner. "I'm just setting up the video to record an ad I was recently in." This was the year 2000, when one still had a VHS. "Okay, thanks, that's reasonable. He's new to the city, keen to add to his showreel. I totally appreciate that he needs to record his advert to get work." 15 minutes pass. We're watching awful TV together while he sits on the edge of his bean bag, waiting for his ad to come on. In this time, I've delighted in noticing that his bed is just a mattress on the floor. It's okay, he's just moved. His primary instrument for cooking is a George Foreman grill. They're surprisingly good. Aha! And the card table is looking a little bit wobbly. The phone rings. Him. "Hang on, I have to take this." Me. "Oh, that's fine. The play doesn't start until 8. Him. "Hello? Oh, you saw it." I realize it's his mum, who lives in a regional town that has different channels to the city. "So you didn't record it?" You didn't? Seriously, Mum, you had one job. One F*** king job. All you had to do was record the F*** king advert. And you couldn't even do that, could you? You are seriously F*** king useless. Why did you even call me? Why? What's the point of you calling me right now? And so on. So I am 18, listening to a 30-year-old man abuse his mother for failing to record his awful advert for his rubbish, non-existent acting career. Awkward. Finally, we accept that the advert has been lost. I realize we are close to missing the play, so I suggest we head off. We go to a bar. He spends the whole time complaining about the mother situation. We drive to the theater. Surprise, surprise, the doors are shut and we miss out. He suggests we go to a Chinese restaurant where he used to get a massive bag of fried rice for $2 when he was a student. I want this night to end and fast, so I agree. We eat the worst, most plastic Chinese food I've had in my life, while he talks about himself, and I nod awkwardly. Finally, I feel I've suffered long enough, and I say, "So, shall I drive you home?" As we drive home, he says, "You know I'm not going to sleep with you, right? Be still, my beating vagina." "You mean you, abuser of mothers, 30-year-old self-absorbed, time-wasting lover of George Foreman grills, do not wish to sleep with me, 18-year-old silent judge of your awfulness? Oh, how my poor, poor heart breaks." And yet, at his door, he tried to kiss me. Worst date ever. The very worst date of my life went like this. I had met a guy online in a local chat room. He was a few years older. I was 16 and he was 18. We talked for months as friends, exchanged pictures and talked about life. Then one day he asked me to go on a date with him. I said sure, and it went downhill from there. I lived in the country, and trying to give people directions could be hard because half of the road signs had been stolen and there were very few landmarks to reference. Turn left by the blue house with a big tree. Basically, trying to get him to my house was a nightmare. This was in early 2000, so while cell phones were starting to become more common, you didn't get service where I lived unless you climbed a tree. He finally got to my house and proceeded to bitch at me because I gave him bad directions and because I lived way out in the middle of nowhere. That should have been my first red flag, but I gave him the benefit of the doubt because I understand it can be frustrating. Then he proceeded to stand in my kitchen telling my dad what a great catch he was. Before everyone jumps to conclusions, it is absolutely normal for a young boy to be nervous when meeting a father. It is normal for them to want to make a good impression, for them to outline why they are a good guy, and to make promises to care for the daughter. That was not what he was doing. He was bragging about himself. He was bragging about his car, and even said something along the lines of my dad being lucky his daughter found such a good-looking guy. My dad looked at me with a look that could only say, "Is this guy kidding?" So we get in the car, and he tells me he thought we could go to a movie. Without asking what I wanted to see, he picked out the movie that he wanted to go to. I'm not against a girl paying for herself at all, but when we got to the counter he bought one ticket and snacks for himself, and then moved aside to allow me to buy my own ticket. Again, that's fine, but if someone asks you out they should pay. Not because the man should pay for the woman, but because they asked you on a date. If I ask someone on a date, I would fully expect to pay for them, because that is implied when I ask them on a date with me. I bought my ticket, but didn't get snacks because I thought he already had. I thought wrong. Those were his snacks, not mine. I could get my own if I wanted them. I sat through a movie I didn't even care to see, with a boy who wouldn't share his snacks, but who kept trying to get me to make out with him. We had planned to go out to eat after the movie, but once we left he said he didn't really want anything to eat. That was okay with me, and I assumed he probably just didn't have enough money. Or maybe he was also starting to realize what a train wreck this date was. Either way, I assumed he would take me home. I assumed wrong. He ended up driving to a parking lot of a store that was being built. It was tucked back out of the way, and the lot was empty. He reclined his seat and told me he needed to nap for a while before taking me home. Nap? What? So what am I supposed to do? Except he didn't want to nap. He truly thought that after yelling at me for my directional skills, bragging about what a catch he was to my father, not sharing his snacks in the theater, not following through with the second part of the date, that I was going to jump over and have sex with him. I told him I would like to go home. He said that was fine, but it would be a while because he was going to nap. He kept begging for a kiss or other favors. I told him I was uncomfortable. I quickly realized I was in an abandoned parking lot, and even though there were hundreds of people around, they were not close enough to hear me if I needed help. I was alone. So I started kissing him and then told him I had to pee really bad. His car was his prized possession. God forbid I peed in it, so we drove to a gas station. I got out of the car and never got back in. I told him my dad was coming to get me and to go home. He asked when I would like to go out again. Actually, he said, "So when do you want to finish what we just started?" I don't hold it against him. Young boys are socially awkward and driven by hormones, but we never went on another date. To add a story on top of this from this old friend of mine, I used to be a bartender, which mainly involved 8 years of being tired, having a sore lower back and screaming "fuck OFF" in my head when people came to the bar. Still, I was under the impression there were certain trade-offs to living a night owl life. First and foremost of which was attention from girls. Oh boy, let me tell you now, that didn't come true. In fact, when women did interact with me directly, it was usually to be rude. I remember kicking a girl out once for being too drunk and dancing on tables inside, and she said, "I'm sorry you're gay," on the way out. I still don't know how that made me gay. Does it really make you gay to ask a woman to stop dancing on a table? If proper table manners and a clean space to eat a Caesar salad is a sign of homosexuality, then sign me up. But among all the mayhem and madness, there was actually one time when a girl showed some clear interest. She was blonde and short, wearing black fishnet stockings with a black corset top. Super sexy but strange choice of outfit, outside of a sex dungeon. She'd been in my bar for a while, drinking on this particular Saturday night with her mate, just the two of them, and while they were getting loose, thankfully they did not try and dance on any tables. By the time it got close to midnight, the bar now drowned out by the sounds of the extremely average DJ we would hire, it was hard enough to hear anyone order a drink, let alone have an actual conversation. So when this little blonde cutie came up to the bar and started trying to talk to me, I had no idea what she wanted. So in all her crafty feminine ways, she whipped out her eyeliner and wrote her phone number on my arm in big, black, bold numbers. I tell you right now, I've never felt more like a big man. Who's gay now, you drunk table dancing stranger? A few hours passed and she left later that night, though you couldn't wipe the smile off my face. So as the night became early morning and the bar closed up, I whipped out my phone and texted this mystery girl. Thinking she'd be tucked up in bed, she actually replied right away saying she was still in the city and keen to catch up for a drink. So I zapped her some trademark charm via text, relying on my years as a powerful storyteller to hit her with a magic line like, "You're pretty hot. Let's go on a date right now." And they say romance is dead. Just 20 minutes later, this random little cutie was walking with me in the still, cold air of a quiet Sydney city. Of course, I hadn't totally thought this late-night date through. I worked in a late-night bar on Sydney Harbor. By the time we'd closed, it was almost 3 a.m. So not only did I need to find a venue that would still be open, but it also had to be so relaxed with their liquor laws that they would let in a super drunk girl wearing fishnet stockings. So I made a judgment call that very quickly became the worst date I've been on. I decided we would go to a strip club. The second we arrived, I knew I'd made a grave error in judgment. I figured we'd stand up the back and have some quiet beers, treat it like a bar. That was not the case. The moment we walked in, a hostess ushered us to a small collection of couches and tables by a long stage. Without blinking, I'd been convinced to buy 2x beers for an outrageous fee. All the while, my very cute date in fishnet stockings sat quite glumly next to me. Turns out she had never been to a strip club and was only in her early 20s. I asked her if she had ever wanted to see what a strip club was like, thinking it might unlock some desire deep within her fishnet-wrapped soul, and that maybe she might enjoy the experience. She said no quietly as a group of loud businessmen bustled past. I don't know if the highlight of this bad date was realizing I didn't even know my date's name, or when the hostess told her she was pretty and asked if she'd ever thought about working in a strip club. I'll admit, in hindsight, it went downhill pretty quickly from the start. My date didn't finish even her beer. In fact, we barely had a conversation for the 30 minutes or so we were there. Eventually, inevitably, she left, falling into a taxi to go back to wherever it was she lived. So I sat and finished off both our beers instead. I think I realized at the time it was the worst date I've ever been on, and it was entirely my fault. I have no doubt that girl tells the same story to this day. And as a stripper stepped onto the table in front of me to dance, I also realized it might actually make me gay to ask her to get off after all. So I let her keep dancing on the table, and tipped her $20 too.